And here we are on the 4th of June, 2020. How are you today?
And,
You're
and the
looking,
world just seems to be getting stranger and
um,
stranger.
is that possible? Is
Yeah,
that possible?
yeah,
And my answer this morning is yes.
it is.
Why?
Because
This envelope just handed to me, of course, it was stored in a mayonnaise jar under the porch at Funkin' Wagnalls.
sis boom ba.
Sis Boom Ba. And the winner of the Stockwell Day Ass Clown Award
Andrew Shear.
is Stockwell Day. Who the hell knew?
That's the fourth year in a
Isn't
row.
that amazing?
Wow. He's got a couple of Grammys too.
That reminds
well,
me
the world
of
just
a
got a little
joke. Of a joke, but it was a movie with Billy Crystal and Robin Williams. Billy Crystal was a big baseball fan. Robin Williams was not. And Billy Crystal's talking to him about Lou Gehrig. And he says, Lou Gehrig, you know? And Robin Williams says, no. He says, no, Lou Gehrig, he died of Lou Gehrig's disease. And the kicker is, of course, Robin Williams replies, imagine the odds of that. So, Ass Clown of the Year, Stockwell. Can you believe? You and I have avoided even wading into this whole thing here up until now, but man, oh man. So that's my rant.
Well, what I'm sorry, is there something currently going on with
Oh, did you
Stockwell
not
Day?
hear? Did you not
No,
hear about this?
I stay away from the papers first thing
I
in the morning.
linked the story. Okay. Stockwell Day declared, I think a day or two ago, that there was no endemic, no systematic racism in this country.
Well, Francois Legault said the very same thing.
Yeah,
2
Legault
days ago.
essentially, I didn't want to get into that, but yeah, he's in the same boat, more or less. So Mr. Day sought to equate what is going on here, the debate that's going on, with the fact that he was bullied as a child because he wore glasses. Okay, there you go.
Okay,
And
well, he's always been a brilliant observer, of the social realm.
Okay. And of course, he was on the board at TELUS. I think TELUS took about 12 and a half minutes to fire his ass, essentially.
This was yesterday?
Yeah, this is about 12 hours ago. I linked to it in the National Post. I didn't want to get into all of it.
Ford said the same thing in Ontario area.
There you go. So this is absolute nonsense, of course, and enough said about that. I will let people go see this.
No, I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah.
And you'd think people even as stupid as Stockwell Day would read the paper and say, I'm not going to say anything about this publicly.
So Stockwell and Stephen Harper should move to Mar-a-Lago and open an ammo and tackle shop just down the street from...
along with that Shear idiots. Talk about sheer stupidity.
Dickwad's house. Anyway, enough of that. Let me stop ranting and move on to something else, because today is the anniversary of the death of my aunt, Therese. And there she is. That picture was taken several years ago.
What
she
a
passed
sweet
away
face.
a year ago today at the age of 89. And she's
your
my
mom's sister, right?
My mother's older sister. And this came up today, of course, but it also connects to what we were discussing with Duke Eatman on Monday. We were talking about records and the sounds that I grew up with, and the record albums, quote unquote, that were in my house as a kid. And today's was a bit of a maverick at the time. This goes back to the early 1960s. She was a single woman. She was on her own. She had her own career. She drove her own car. It sounds ridiculous to be talking that way about a woman in this day and age. But in the 60s, that was unusual. And she had her own pursuits and her own loves and her own tastes for various things. And I remember one day, I was about 7 years old, approximately. The phone rings. This was a couple of days before my birthday, which is in April. And my mother picked up the phone. She said, hello. She said, oh, it's Therese. She'd like to speak to you. So she hands me the phone, and Therese says, hi, how are you? I said, I'm fine. She said, your birthday's coming up. Yes. And she was speaking to me in French. She says, aimes-tu le chant? Le chant, as in C-H-A-N-T, singing.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I guess so. She said, okay, put your mother back on the phone. So there we go, blah, blah, blah. And a couple days later, she showed up with a present for me, and it was a record album. And it was this album by Mario Lanza. And the title, You Do Something to Me, is not germane to the story. It was the fact that a 7-year-old opened a record album, and it was a Mario Lanza album. But this was something that my aunt thought that I would enjoy. And it was a joke that she and I shared over many, many years, because she had no real clue as to what kids were into back in those days. But I can
Well, you were certainly a huge Mario Lanza
yeah,
fan
and to
at
this
7.
day, and this is the very record album. I remember this as if it were yesterday. I don't recall listening to it very much, but I think fondly of today's when I see this. And this is why I was humming You Do Something to Me this morning when I was preparing for our
Do you still
broadcast.
have this album?
I do not. It was probably lost in the collection. Perhaps my mother has it at home. I don't know. But this was, I remember it was cause for much mirth and merriment when I opened
She
that,
gave
because
you a
I had no clue.
stereo.
In electronically reprocessed stereo, which is pretty well the story of my life. So
Yeah.
a very fond.
Yeah, like reprocessed cheese. He was born in Philadelphia.
Was he?
Yeah.
Okay, so I
He
love
had
this
a
album.
rather checkered career. Lovely, good, not baritone, tenor voice.
You do something to me.
Yeah. And he was in movies, and in many ways he was an idiot savant.
Was he?
Fantastic
Well,
singer,
okay. Well,
but
that pretty well wraps it up for me then. So there we are, an artist's rendition of Mario Lanza hugging a tree or whatever he's doing there. But
now
anyway,
available at Woolworths in the record department.
anyway, my thoughts
Oh,
today.
that's a sweet
my
story.
thoughts are with my mom too, and with my uncle, their kid brother Norman, and all the friends and family. So, and
Well,
also my thoughts.
Your mom's going to see this later today, then.
I guess so. And my thoughts are also, and we spent quite some time with today's in seniors residence in these parts. And my thoughts also go out to the folks who have been struggling with that too over the recent weeks, and how tragic a
elder
story
care
that is.
homes.
Oh yeah, it's quite something. So
Well, their treatment of her was exemplary, wasn't it?
yes, she was in a private residence, and a tip of the hat to those folks too, because they work very, very hard. So I hope this. My goodness, are there enough lessons for us to be learning? And these days, I hope that we do learn and apply what should be applied.
Well,
Anyway, so that's
we've been blindsided by so much.
Yeah.
I think many of us feel disoriented a lot of the time.
Yeah. All right, Susan Pinker is our guest. She is on standby here. Let's bring her in. And let me just get back to while she's tuning in to the.
Good morning, Susan.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. I was wondering if you forgot about me, you guys.
No.
Oh no, not at all.
I just want to
Okay.
show.
Not at all. We just
cover of
tend
the
to go
book
on
there.
tangential little trips.
David, could you do a reset on your microphone there while I talk about just the
Sure.
unplug?
Just give me a
Susan
second
Pinker,
here.
author of The Village Effect: How Face-to-Face Contact Can Make Us Healthier and Happier. Susan, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Ivan.
I started to read your book about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and then I stopped reading your book because it made me sad for a number of reasons. It made me sad because I realized, for one thing, and there are many facets, of course, that we can discuss, but I realized for one thing that women's social networks are much more tightly knit than men's social networks are. And I'm looking at this guy here, whom I've known for nearly 40 years, and we're very much of that type where we're this far apart, and guys don't really talk very much, and they sort of bump into furniture every once in a while. Is that pretty well your take on things? Did I interpret that correctly?
Well, men have larger networks. That was a surprise to me.
Larger,
but
Okay.
more distant. So when I was interviewing people for that book, and one of the people I profiled first was a musician, and I said, well, could you tell me about your friends? And he opened up his flip phone and he started listing off the 300 contacts he had on his phone. So I thought, oh, these are all your friends? He said, oh yeah.
Mhm.
I said, well, how often do you speak to them? He said, well, once every year or two.
There you go.
And
That's
then
a
when I
pretty
asked
loose
another,
friendship.
pardon me?
That's a pretty loose friendship.
Right. So that's more typical of men. Of course, when we talk about men and women, we're not talking about everybody, right? We're talking about averages.
Right.
And so there are going to be people who do not fit that profile at all and who will be exceptions, and they're very much normal and part of the human mosaic, let's just say.
But the primary thesis of the book, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need this contact. We need to be in proximity. We need to touch one another and chat and be within closer than 2 meters or 6
Right.
meters, whatever it is.
So this period of time has led to me calling it the unvillage effect, kind of, because we can't get close to each other. We can't hug and kiss each other. In Quebec, that's, even strangers do that.
Yep.
When they meet each other. And so it's been very hard on everybody. We can't see our close friends or even our distant friends, one of the 300. We can only see the people with whom we share a roof and a bathroom and a kitchen. So it's really put a strain on everybody. And that's why mental health problems have gone through the roof over the last 3 months or so.
What do you assess? I mean, everything seems so new, Susan, that we're going through because such things change and yet they don't. It's kind of like a Groundhog Day effect. But what do you assess as the physiological and psychological effects we're all going through?
Well, it's hard to know because the research is running to catch up with our situation, as you probably know from reading all the COVID-19 research reports. It's really hard to keep up with the evaluations, and often the psychological or behavioral science research lags behind because it takes much longer and is more complex. But I would say the immediate effects will be very different than the long-term effects. I think the immediate effects are people feel ill at ease, they feel that they're lonely, they're missing people, and frankly, if I can say it to you guys, grumpy.
That's fine. That's
Yeah, but that nothing's changed.
no, that's pretty well. So
yeah, and so, but in the long term, people have asked me over the last month or 6 weeks, isn't this terrible in the long term, et cetera? Aren't more people going to die? And I don't think so. I think it's just a small blip. For most of us adults, it's just a very tiny little blip in our lifespans, where when we recover, I mean, everybody's talking about the new normal, but it doesn't really amount to a lot of time in the swing of things. And we will get back to what we used to do, maybe with some minor tweaks.
So that's
what
essentially
about the difference between people our age, and I've got 2 grandchildren.
You lucky devil.
Oh, well, one of the hard things, Susan, is I can't hug them. I can go and see them 6 feet apart, but I can't hug the little divils. And they're adorable.
Of course.
What I would like to know the effect on them, because the younger of the 2 is 19 months. This is almost all he's known. So I'm wondering what socializing effects, good and ill or of any kind, these kids are going through.
Well, I think there's positive and negatives of what's going on now. So let's start with the positives, is that a lot of children with working parents don't see them that much during the day. And this has changed. People are working from home and they're spending a lot more time with their children. And I think that in some ways, kids will look at this, or those who can remember it, I'm not sure about the 19-month-old, but your older grandchild will remember it as a very sweet time in their lives when they had more access to their parents. And they did things, in my neighborhood, if I go out for a walk, I see, guys playing Frisbee with their kids and mothers going for bike rides. I never used to see that in a workday, during a workday. So this is a positive thing. The negative side is there's a lot more screen time for kids because it's a necessity for parents who are working especially, or who need to keep their sanity. And it's not good for them, especially for young ones. And so ultimately, and this is a study actually that has been launched at Boston University by Joshua Hartshorn and his colleagues and students. And it's ongoing, where they're asking people, how much screen time their kids are getting that they know of, and what they think the effects are on their language development, on their emotional state, etc. So the short answer to that is we don't know what will happen long term, and it depends on how long this goes on.
And the 5-year-old, it's interesting, Susan. It started with I think my generation with our kids. Everything was structured. There was skating, and then there was dance, and there was acting, and the blah 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 throughout the year. And of course, my daughter's kids had this too. They had dancing and piano, and the 5-year-old, although she seems frustrated, is getting a lot of the more disorganized play that we had as kids when your mom said, "Go outside and play." And that's
Right.
what you did.
That's
I don't
interesting.
know if that is a positive aspect, but it's certainly interesting to see them just being on their own and organizing things with their own imagination.
I know that. So that once again, everything has trade-offs. So the trade-off is they don't get to go to school and see their little friends, which is part of really a normal pattern of human development. We need that. But on the other hand, they're getting more unstructured time for free play, which is also excellent for the developing brain. So there, I really hesitate to latch on to this very apocalyptic view of what's happening to us. I think people recover. It's amazing how people recover from the most terrible experiences one can imagine and go on to lead valuable lives where they contribute, and long lives. I mean, we know from research on Holocaust survivors that their terrible experience did not kill them, and many of them who are dying now are in their 90s.
Yeah.
And some of them have been, I would say, tortured and warped by their experience, but many of them went on to lead happy and productive lives. So I think I hesitate to say that this is going to be a really terrible thing in the long run, but I think it's painful in the short run for sure.
So
And it depends on how long it persists. I mean, I don't think personally I'm going to do well with another year of this. My kids don't live in Montreal. I haven't seen them since Christmas. I don't like
That's
that.
the other one. I'm lucky. I've got all the kids and the grandkids here. People have kids in Vancouver and Los Angeles and Calgary, and yeah, it's tough.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's it.
So am I hearing that there may be a beneficial rebound effect after this is over? Is that what you're suggesting? In a sense that
I don't know if it's a better. I think that in the current moment, there are positive effects having to do with more, if I can say, FaceTime between kids and parents, and more cooking together, more board games, more doing homework together in a non-stressful type of way. As working parents, you work all day, you come home, you're exhausted, you put supper on the table, and then it's looking at homework, and then it's bath time, and then it's bed. And by the time all of that is over, you feel like you've run a marathon, you drop into bed, and then it's the same thing the next day. So essentially, this is a bit of a reprieve in some respects. And the expectations have dropped, or they should have dropped. Right. Those of us who are still expecting to accomplish the same thing every single day that we used to do really haven't adjusted to the new normal.
Yeah, it's funny how being around the house all the time, well, with my daughter's age, both she and her husband work from home. So it makes your point. She's on a Zoom call with all her colleagues, and the 5-year-old just comes barging into the room, and that's the end of that conference. And it happens every day. They're on this fast-moving treadmill, and it goes on and on. I give them full points, but boy, it must be tiring as hell. I mean, I'm tired a lot. And
yeah, well, and they can't
just lie on the couch.
And they can't use you as extra childcare because you can't go into their house. Is that right?
No, exactly. We can't be.
Sorry about the phone ringing. We'll just have to ignore that.
That's fine. That's part and parcel of this.
One of the things you talked about in the Village Effect is high density, and the epidemiological irony of that is that New York, Montreal, Toronto, high density places are the hotspots for COVID-19.
Yeah,
they are unhealthy rather than healthy.
That's the paradox, is that everything that was healthy for us is now unhealthy. So usually high density is exactly a good thing for us because there are fewer cars, there's more walking, there's more interaction between neighbors and in the community, more what we call social integration, meaning just casual encounters. But of course, when you're talking about a virus, it means that the virus can hop from one person to another, and all of that has to be shut down. So, once again, we have this push me, pull you effect of what was good for us before is bad for us now, and vice versa. And it takes a lot of, I would say, careful strategizing to get what we need in this current environment, so that, we do have social contact, but it's not going to kill us, right? Especially people who are above 60.
Well, Dave is tired just from being tired, but when people come to you,
and I'm not. I am exhausted by being exhausted.
He's just tired about thinking about being tired. But Susan, people are coming to you for advice, aren't they? Isn't your phone ringing every 5 minutes and saying, "Susan, help me"?
No, I haven't done that in a good 15, 20 years.
Okay.
I've been just writing and lecturing and, articles and books for a living. So no. And so part of making my transition to that kind of life is it's a very solitary life. So, I've had to make my own adjustments over the years of like, especially researching the village effect, my lifestyle is going to kill me. I have to fix this. Right. And so I had to really change the way I was doing things once I started to learn about the research, that it was worse than not getting exercise or smoking or being an alcoholic was being solitary.
So
and especially in a time when it's considered to be a badge of honor to be an introvert. It's been that way since Susan Cain's book came out called Quiet. And it's sort of, it's a myth. There aren't that many introverts among the human species. It's about a quarter, if that. And even the introverts need social contact. So it's like saying, I have I don't have a big appetite, so I've decided I'm not going to eat it all today or ever.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whereas most of us need a steady diet of being in touch with other people, however we can do it. And right now you have to be really creative about it. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I go for walks, I call a friend ahead of time and say, meet me on your porch and I'll be at the end of your driveway and we'll have a chat.
Right.
Yeah. I have friends who call each other for Pilates or yoga just to make sure they get out of bed, because sometimes you don't feel like getting out of bed. They call them and you say, okay, are you ready for the yoga? They hang up the phone and then they call each other again in an hour. It's just to make sure that you're doing something and somebody is keeping an eye on you.
So will there be a village effect 2?
You mean another book about this? Probably not. I mean,
Okay.
I'm doing a lot of press about COVID-19 and its effects and how to get around them. I mean, I wouldn't lie. I mean, it's really like 3 interviews a week or something like that, and articles and so on. But I don't think I've had enough with that topic. After you've spent 5 years writing a book, you want to learn something new.
Okay.
So I'll probably, I'm making the transition to something a little bit different, related but different.
So
there's a lot of new stuff about this as well, about the outlook of a person, a happier person as opposed to a more somber person, and how they deal with it. Would you concur that the person with a happier, more positive, more optimistic outlook would be able to weather this better, or is that not known yet?
Is that too facile?
Well, I would say that somebody with a more easygoing, happy outlook and personality can weather all sorts of stresses better. And so this would be just one of them. Will it make them live longer? Will it make them ward off the virus better? No. But it'll make them a happier person and easier to live with, right? Because one of the stresses now is people are thrown together 24/7 who are not used to that. Even some married couples are not used to spending that much time together. And it's a test of their relationship.
So what is the takeaway from what you have been suggesting people do at this time, then, in all the columns you're writing and the interviews you're doing?
The takeaway is to adapt the features of face-to-face contact that we can apply to interacting at 2 meters distance.
Okay.
So learning about the features of social interaction that are beneficial and kind of making them fit our current circumstances as much as we can. So for example, one of the aspects of doing things with other people is synchrony, doing things at the same time as others. So that's why people who go to church and synagogue and mosque are healthier than the rest of us, is that they stand up and sit down and bow and sing and do all those things all at the same time, which gives us a feeling of belonging and reassurance. And we can do that online. So for example, I used to swim laps, but then I, as you know, from reading my book, I switched to swimming on a team because I realized I need social contact, right? But there's no pools open now. So the team meets in Zoom workouts in the morning 3 times a week, and we all see each other in little icons on the screen, and we're all doing burpees and jumping jacks and crunches together. And there's a coach and he's timing us, and everybody's doing it together. And of course, I wouldn't do any of that if I wasn't with the group. I mean, virtually. And B, seeing everybody there with me doing it gives me a little extra boost. So getting back to the first point is that when we know the little features of social interaction that are beneficial, we can see if we can translate them to either our virtual contact or our bottom of the driveway contact.
Does it take more discipline to get through the day?
Yes. Yeah, maybe that's why you're tired.
No, there are many other
I have no
reasons why he's
discipline.
tired, and it's got.
No, I've got a sister-in-law who plays virtual bridge 3 times a week. Virtual bridge 3 times a week. I'm wondering, Susan, where there is a point too where just everything's being thrown at it. It's not just COVID-19. It's the unrest going on in the United States.
And here.
The war of it seems conservative versus liberal mind. China, it seems to be the perfect storm that just gets larger and larger. Every time we think we've handled an aspect of something like COVID-19, something else is thrown at us. We have to self-isolate, but the big world keeps coming in anyway, in its ugliest form these days.
I think it's adding to the stresses and the feeling that the world as we know it is disintegrating. That, I mean, we feel less security because we can't be in touch with people who make us feel good. So right away, we're unsettled. I would say about 1/3 of the population was chronically lonely before the pandemic. And now I would say it's at least 2/3. And then with the civil unrest in the United States, it's probably doubled.
Yeah, well, somebody, Andre Picard in the Globe and Mail said that racism is a public health issue.
Yeah, well, so is loneliness a public health issue.
So is loneliness, yes. So are many things that we're stretching things here a little bit, but I'm going to stretch it further. Again, to bring back the point that people like to do things together. Perhaps this is part of the reason why so many people are out on the streets now, demonstrating together.
Oh, that's an interesting point of view that I hadn't considered. I think they do want to feel that they're part of something, and standing up in protest to that tragic event is being part of something big.
I guess I was just extending what you were suggesting a moment ago, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So, Susan, our time is up. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
This is fascinating.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So I have a question for you once you stop recording, or you can just cut this, because this isn't live, is it?
It is. We've been recording this entire thing now.
Oh.
So what we will be doing, Susan, is we will be putting it up on YouTube and Facebook and on our own page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that cool with you?
Is that all right?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Okay. Oh, no problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
And no, I had a question about the technology that we can discuss after you stop recording this interview, if you want.
Okay. Well, then we will do that, and then we will continue our conversation. So let me remove you from the call for a moment, and then we will reconnect with you, and then we'll pursue our technical discussion. But thank you for joining us for this chat, Susan.
It's my pleasure, and it's so nice to hear these familiar voices.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Susan. Good to see you again.
Dave.
Bye
Take
now.
care.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye now.
All right. Your microphone is creeping again, but very interesting.
It's funny,
again,
I didn't notice it.
I didn't. I can hear it again. But anyway, that's another glitch that we're going to repair. That's fine. We could have talked to Susan for about an hour and a half here.
Oh,
I had so many stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because
But
by the time when we first invited her, it was pretty much COVID-19.
Yeah.
And then the shit hit the fan of Trump and George Floyd and race. Well, it just, and the conservative mind, which wants certainty, and the liberal mind, which wants change. And I mean, there's just so much psychologically she could deal with that we're all trying to deal with.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, and the way my little brain works is you got to circle back, and then you got to love the ones that you're with, and extend.
No doubt. All I'm saying is, as it goes on longer, and as Susan alluded to, there are days where that gets more difficult to do.
Yeah.
You want to go feh.
Yeah. Well, I will let you go feh and go back to bed. You could just go back to bed.
I think I'm going to go for a snooze.
Yeah, just go have a
cup
little
of coffee
snooze.
anyway.
And
we'll talk to you tomorrow.
And Mario Lanza will be wafting. You do something to me.
I rarely hear you sing, and that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. Talk to you tomorrow.